Guess what, guys? It's Thursday again, your favorite day of the week, because that's the day of the MMA Eco Live podcast. We are live, guys, from beautiful, majestic Portland, Oregon, in the United States. And guys, let's talk about some fights this weekend. We got a lot coming up with, we got a lot of Tibetans in action. Honestly, like a big portion of the top Tibetan fighters are all fighting this weekend. That's pretty cool. We've got one event in Denver, and then we've also got a JCK event this Saturday. Sorry, it's having me do some funky stuff here. All right, we're good. So on today's podcast, we'll run through all those different topics. We'll talk about anything else that comes to my mind. And we will also get to your questions. Feel free to drop those as the podcast goes on. Me, literally 5 minutes before the go live time, me with ADHD being like, I have 5 minutes. I can make some coffee. But look, I made it on time, 4 o'clock sharp. Still very hot. Yeah. I always get into this thing where I'll like have to do something at a time. And then I'll think of all the things that I can do beforehand, thinking I've got plenty of time. And then I inevitably end up being late. So I either do that or I way overcompensate and I show up to things way early because I was like, it takes 5 minutes to drive there, but I need to get there 30 minutes early so I'm not late. So it's one or the other. But today we made it just on time and we've got the coffee, which it's like in the upper 90s today. So it's not really like a hot coffee kind of day, but it's always a hot coffee kind of day for me. For yours truly, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit thumbs up on the video as well. Really appreciate that. Let's get into it kind of covers the whole weekend. The Tibetan fighters fighting this weekend. I would say probably in like 5 years' time, you'll have like double the number of Tibetan fighters in the UFC that you do right now. You know, when I was talking to, when I was in Vegas a couple weeks ago for Road to UFC, I was talking to a guy named Victor who manages a couple of Chinese fighters. He's really involved with the Chinese MMA scene. I was talking to him and he asked me who my top 3 Chinese fighters were that I thought could be a UFC champion someday. So I gave him mine and I asked him what his were. And he said this featherweight fighter named Zhou Wang, who competes this weekend. Zhou Wang is a Tibetan fighter. Same old story from the Umbo fight gym, trains with the PI and is on a ridiculous tear and is looking like someone that the UFC may want to bring in sooner rather than later. So in JCK, they've had this featherweight tournament, 3 rounds, and the 2 finalists of this featherweight tournament are Zhou Wang and a Chinese Kazakh named Nartai Kazabai. 2 really, really good prospects of Chinese MMA. Zhou Wang, in the semifinal round of the tournament, he fought against a guy named Hublan Tuarshenbieka, who is another Chinese Kazakh like Nartai, but unlike Nartai, has a lot more experience. So this was looking like it would definitely be Zhou Wang's toughest fight to date. I remember saying before this fight came up, if Zhou Wang can get by Hublan, then I feel like there may not be anyone that could stand in his way. Hublan's got really good wrestling. He pushes a really hard pace. And recently his boxing has been getting a lot better too. He's overall a pretty technical guy. So I felt like this was kind of the ultimate test on at least the Chinese regional scene to see if you're ready for the next level. He passed it. I feel like of Nartai and Hublan, probably Hublan was the tougher test of the 2. So I feel like Zhou Wang should be able to get it. He landed this like sickening knee against Hublan that dropped him, or he landed the knee and then that wounded Hublan. And then Zhou Wang goes for a throw, throws him to the ground, keeps rolling, lands on his back in the triangle position. I have no idea how Houlihan survived the submission choke. Either way, Zawang looked tremendous in that fight, stayed out of the way of Houlihan's attack. His boxing, defended his takedowns, looked really sharp. So I feel like Zawang does have a really good chance of someone that just keeps going and going. He can be really wild sometimes. He's a flashy kind of guy, so there's always the chance that he gets caught being really wild or flashy. I feel like that's his biggest weakness. Even off of his back, he's really, really dangerous. He's a sneaky good submission guy. So I'm really excited for this fight. Nar Tai has also been a really good prospect for a while. I think he's 9-1 as a pro. So he hasn't lost in his last 8 fights. He's on an 8-fight win streak. He's got wins over people like Reginaldo Vieira, Tough Brazil finalist or winner. He's got a win over a guy named Moxon Chachatrian fighting at mixed fight. That was against an Armenian guy. One veteran, Zhao Zhikong. So he's got some pretty good wins. He's definitely a top prospect as well. The other bit that goes on at the JCK event this weekend is the opening round of the 170-pound tournament, which I definitely would say is the weakest of the tournaments that JCK does a tournament with. You've got some good guys like Corbin Zhang, who's a former JCK champion. I would say he's probably the best Chinese fighter of that bunch. There's also a Brazilian guy that's in the mix. But Zawang definitely going to be the star this weekend at JCK. Later in the day, over at the UFC Apex, you've got 2 UFC Tibetan fighters making their debut. For Rongju, it's his re-debut. So you've got both Rongju and Ija fighting in the UFC. 2 teammates, 2 Tibetan guys, 2, I would say, really great prospects, really tough. I'll jump into this card real quick and highlight these two matchups at featherweight and lightweight. So first up, you've got Ija, winner of the featherweight Road UFC tournament. He's fighting against Gabriel Santos, which is a really difficult fight for your first UFC fight. I thought they may start him off a little bit slower, but Gabriel, he's got 2 straight losses in the UFC. But let's look at his record, and you can kind of see why I feel like he's probably underrated. His losses are a split decision against Lerone Murphy and a KO loss against David Onama. 2 really, really good fighters. Lerone Murphy is ranked now. So before that, he was on a tear through Brazil, undefeated. So I think this is a tough fight. Ija, I think, has really good what we've seen from him in Road UFC is the first year that he was in Road UFC, he showed that he was a really good grappler, but not much more than that. He lost out on being signed by the UFC after the first season because he wasn't the most exciting in his performance. And then he came back in the second season and fought a lot more aggressively with his striking. So he definitely got the message. And sometimes his striking was just so in the second season, he would just put so much pressure and be so aggressive that even if he wasn't always the most technical against that level of competition, sometimes his striking was pretty effective. So I got to give him props for trying to impress the bosses. And even though I wouldn't say he ever he didn't get a TKO finish. He didn't, really seriously injure anyone on the feet. You can definitely tell that it's something he's been working on. And in between Road UFC and this fight, he's been at Team Alpha Male. So he has been putting his best foot forward in improving. His overall record is 25-4, which is ridiculous. And he's 27 years old. So really the guy, he's got a high ceiling. He's at the beginning of his prime. He's got a great record and is from what I can tell, a super hard worker and is always pushing to to lean into his weaknesses and smooth things out. So I think that Ija is probably being underestimated for the, like, looking at Gabriel Santos. He's the favorite in this fight, but I definitely feel like Ija is being underrated in this fight. I think that he's got a lot of positive momentum right now in the way that he's fleshing things out. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him just like put a really strong pace on Gabriel Santos, and whether through clinch work, wrestling, going up and down, grappling, probably he's going to be beaten to the punch on the feet. But you never know. He could have some new wrinkles, and the aggression too is a big thing to think through. So it's hard to predict who's going to win this fight. I mean, Ija has proven that he's, to me at least, that it's hard for me to pick against him. So I'm going to pick him to win a decision. But, if Gabriel Santos has no part of the clinch work and the takedowns, then he could, he could not only get a decision, but a finish on the feet. So we'll see. Looking forward to that. And then the other Tibetan that we've got in action is Rongju. Similar kind of record as Ija, 25-5, except he's even younger at 24 years old. See, he's from the Unboa Fight Gym and trains at the PI currently. Although he's also been putting time in at Team Alpha Male. He's been in California for a little bit. So he, like Ija, also won the previous or season 2 of Road UFC, the lightweight season or lightweight tournament. And, he had a okay UFC run. It seemed like he was maybe just a little bit too green. And then he not only won in UAE Warriors, but he looked great in Road UFC. He just proved himself to be a pulverizer. We saw that against all 3 opponents, but especially against Shin Haraguchi. Shin was trying to wrestle him over and over and over, but Rongju just is able to get back to his feet over and over, and just the aggression, the damage that he was dishing out to Shin Haraguchi eventually set up the rear naked choke finish. He wore down a guy that is really hard to wear down. He looked great against Shin Haraguchi, and it's hard to look really, really good against Shin Haraguchi. We saw that even in his narrow loss at the Road UFC tournament just a couple weeks ago. So he's going to be fighting American Chris Padilla, who is also a guy that I don't know a whole lot about. He's got just this one win in the UFC, first round submission. I think this is a perfect kind of fight for him. Wasn't too long ago that he had lost the last 4 of his last 5 fights, but then he went on a tear, and now he's also on a pretty nice finishing streak of 4 in a row as well. So I believe he is where is he based out of? He's based out of Southern California, Fight Science MMA. So honestly, not too familiar with Chris Padilla's game, but I expect that this should be an action-packed fight. I mean, you look at all these fights, there's a lot of finishes on here. Just a couple decisions and a couple submission losses to his credit. So I expect that this will probably be a very action-packed fight, Rongju versus Chris Padilla. Just kind of, I'm interested to see. I know Rongju is the favorite right now, but I'm curious to see what fan perception is. It looks like most people think that Rongju is going to get a decision win. A couple people think a TKO. I mean, honestly, it could happen. I mean, he is a guy that puts out a lot of damage. He strikes at every single angle. So it could happen. Sorry, I meant to do a little bit more research on these fights ahead of time this afternoon, but I had some other stuff come up with my other job, and I wasn't able to give as much in-depth of a breakdown as I would have liked. But there you go. It should be a fun, action-packed fight, Rongju versus Chris Padilla. So that's the UFC card this weekend. Just if I'm going to throw out some of my other top picks for the fight, I don't usually do this, but I am going to be doing the results for Tapology Live. And I think there could be a lot of exciting. It's a really good card from top to bottom. We did lose Calvin Kattar, but Nathan Fletcher, he's a fun prospect from Cage Warriors that I've watched for a long time. We've also got, I think, Andre Lima versus Felipe Dos Santos should be a good fight. Felipe Dos Santos, I think, is a good prospect at 125 pounds. Isaac Dolgarian is making his first appearance since his first loss. I think Dolgarian still is a great prospect. Trevor Peek versus Yanal Ashmuz should be a barn burner. Kyle Nelson versus Steve Garcia. Someone should go down on that fight. Steve Garcia has been looking good recently. Co-main, you've got Jessica Andrade versus Natalia Silva. Natalia Silva, we'll see if she can really like put herself in that top 5 of the division. She has been really impressive with her striking, very, very technical on the feet. And Andrade has had a pretty rough go. She's kind of, I feel like, fallen into a little bit of a gatekeeper status. So this is the perfect kind of gatekeeping fight to see if Natalia Silva is ready to go to the top of the flyweight division. And then the main event is a really cool fight, Gilbert Burns versus Sean Brady. Really a fight for the hardcore fans. Sean Brady is just so powerful, so fun to watch on the mat. And that's honestly a lot of what Gilbert Burns is too. He's a kind of a super athlete and is an amazing wrestler, grappler, all that stuff. So could we get a striking fight? Possibly. If it is that, I feel like everything in me wants to lean just slightly towards Burns. He's just a very complete kind of fighter. So really looking forward to this UFC card. I wish that this was in front of a full arena of fans, because this is honestly a card that you could put in front of, a potentially sold out crowd. Lots of great fights. So the other thing coming up this weekend is tomorrow evening is the one event in Denver. And I'll preface this by saying that I think the card will be really, really exciting and probably worth your time. So don't hear me ever say you shouldn't watch this event. It's not, I think, to be honest, one events are very exciting. And I think that it'll be just like nonstop action from pillar to post in the Ball Arena. And so if you're going to the event, I think that you're going to have the time of your life at this show. And I think this is a not only an exciting event, but I think that, let's just run through it real quick. This card has lost so much of its star power. It has lost a lot. It has lost a lot. We lost Stamp versus Xiong. We lost Cade. Tapology editor did not get that right. It should be Mikey Musumeci versus Cade Rutola. We lost that one. We also lost Samat Mamedov against Maurice Abevi. That fell out today. We also lost Hiroba Minowa against Sanjar Zakirov. So this event is down to just 10 fights. It is really, it's taken a lot of hits. And before I give my criticism, I want to preface by just saying that this will be a really exciting fight. It's got a little bit of a lot of things. You've got Adrian Lee on the card. You've got Elise Anderson versus Victoria Souza. This fight, Minowa versus Zakirov, not happening. Tetsuka versus Fiti Kefu. That should be really exciting. Tetsuka's got an exciting style. So does Isi Fiti Kefu. I bet you get a knockout in that fight. Abebi versus Mamedov, not happening. John Lineker in a Muay Thai fight against Asa Tim Powell. That's only on this card to just give it a big old shot of adrenaline. So, that'll be exciting. Onglan Song versus Shamil Erdogan. That should be exciting too. High chance for a knockout in that fight. Liam Harrison versus Saxon should be exciting. Musumeci versus Oliveira. Don't know, but I did see that Mikey Musumeci lost his belt. He's no longer the champ because he missed either weight or hydration or both. But that's now a non-title fight, or I should say, Oliveira is the only one eligible to win that fight. He stepped in on just a few days ago. So, and then Haggerty versus Superlex should be exciting as well. I kind of just focus on the MMA fights, which we've got now. How many have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4. Just 4 MMA fights on this card. But I think, you should get your money's worth. If you're at home on a Friday evening in the US, then this would be a great use of your time. All that to say, this is a weird card. This is a very strange event to put on in the United States. A really strange event. Even with the original main event being Stamp versus Xiong, an MMA fight, there's only 4 MMA fights, and fans are likely to be entertained, I would say, but it's just a very strange. The Amazon Prime partnership, when they announced that, I expected what I expected from one was that they would put most of their MMA fights on the Amazon. That they would put most of their MMA fights on the Amazon Prime shows, and that they would put more of their Muay Thai and kickboxing on the morning shows, or I should say the Bangkok shows, or even, there's a really interesting divide of branding that you have going on. Is one championship trying to break into the US market with MMA and even an exciting brand of striking, or are they trying to build up a circuit in Bangkok and serve those fans the best like Muay Thai and striking? It's ideally those would be kind of separate, but instead it's like, there's a couple ties on this card. It's just a very strange way to try to be like, we're going to go to the Ball Arena in Denver and try to sell it out. And talking about ticket sales, I don't really know what to make of it because I can't see all that's going on behind the scenes, but I have seen some fishy things going on with ticket sales. I'm not saying illegal or wrong, but just like, I will look at their ticket sales from time to time and see where they're at. And you'll see is you'll look like 1 week, you'll look at the arena. I have screenshots for this to show what I'm talking about. 1 week, you'll look at the arena and it will be like, wow, there's not very many tickets available. It looks like they're getting close to a sellout. And then the next week, you'll look at the same view and then there'll be like solid lines of seats all the way around the arena that are now available that weren't available before. So it's hard to even know, like, because they've got a third of the arena blocked off. So it's like a sellout of the Ball Arena really isn't a sellout if you're not even putting a third of the tickets up for sale at all. Like, they're not even potential options because they're behind your catwalk in your cage. So let me just see what I can show you here. I'm always so interested in this kind of stuff. So, all right. You'll see here that overall, you could look at this and be like, wow, there aren't a whole lot of tickets available. You'll see like it's right here, this dividing line right here. Everything behind here is not available ever to be sold. And you'll see like, wow, they've sold like this whole section here, all of this section right here. A couple weeks ago, these nosebleeds here on the back wall, most of these were not available. And then a couple weeks ago, this line of blue shows up and this line of blue shows up, meaning that even though what I'm saying here is that even these seats that are showing as unavailable, sometimes that doesn't always mean that the seat has been sold. It just means that they have not released it yet. And so it's very hard to tell how close they actually are to a sellout. You also have the free tickets that they give away. They give tickets away to gyms. So there'll be like large groups that will be kind of reserved for a certain section. So it's very hard to tell. Either way, they're not going to sell it out. They're not going to get it close to selling it out. So that's, I think, why I'm bringing up ticket sales, all of that. They don't ever release numbers on attendance and like gate, things like that. I think because the gate number probably not that great because they give away so many free tickets. But I'm bringing this up. It's like, why are you talking about this instead of talking about this amazing card? I bring it up because I just think that it's a very odd card when you have so many fighters that are MMA fighters with one championship that can't get a fight. We just saw Marcus Buchecha. He posted today that he's been waiting for like 13 months for a fight from one. Why was he not put on this card? That is a mystery to me. Why did we not put like 10 MMA fights on this card and maybe like 2 grappling fights, 2 or 3 Muay Thai fights? I don't really know. I feel like this should have been an MMA heavy card because this is just their second show in the US. They're very much still building up their US audience. And now I know while they've only got 4 MMA fights, the original plan was to have 7. But yeah, I just would have expected, even with their show coming up in Atlanta in a couple months, like there's so many MMA fighters to build up. Like, I don't feel like we need to make every single show this perfectly hybrid show. It seems to me, and they would have the numbers better than I would, but like, we're still building this US market. Like, all we're trying to do right now is sell out these arenas. And sure, you can put Rod Tang on there. You can put like him. You can put Mikey Musumeci on there, Cade Rutolo, some of those, some of like your most recognizable names. But overall, it just seems like a really strange card to put together for Denver. I don't know why this is the way it is when there's so many fighters that are on the shelf, but there you have it. I don't know that I'll actually be able to watch the event tomorrow, but I will have, results up, and we'll be interested to see how it goes. I'm honestly even more interested to see how the Atlanta show goes because, and the other thing is that this was really funny. The way that this was posted was that Chatri, he was like, Demetrius Johnson will be in attendance at 168, and he's got a big announcement. Is it going to be a retirement, or is it going to be the greatest fight of all time? I don't even know. I'm like, Chatri, like it's the whole Dana White of like, yeah, I don't know what's going on at the Apex. You know what's going on. You're the boss. You help make the fights. Like, you know exactly what's going on. My guess is that DJ is going to retire. So that's my prediction there. So should be interesting. Let's hop into your questions. We got a lot of them. Am I frustrated that one never fixed the poster with Stamp and Cade still on it? On Sound and Pound, Drake said it's intentionally bad business practice. I agree. Or do you agree? I actually disagree and say it's good business practice because one is trying to sell every last ticket that they can. The lowest ticket price, there's actually a lot of tickets that you can buy for 168 that are $36. That is a steal. That's like cheap seats at a like a regional MMA show, and that's at like the NBA arena for a bigger promotion. So they're trying to get everyone that they can in there. And I would say it's good business practice in the immediate for them because they're just trying to get everyone in there. I was really frustrated with that. They had Stamp on there for a long time, like months after she had already dropped out. They were still advertising the event that she was going to be fighting. So they're lying to the fans in that way. And then the Mikey and Cade fight, was it Nick Atkin had said like, oh yeah, I've been hearing rumors about this for a while. So another example, they put that fight on there for a long time. And just the fact that they never put out any kind of release like this fight has been canceled, I feel like that is something that every single other professional promotion does. Is even the UFC will put out notices to their website saying changes to UFC fight night, whatever. And they'll say that the fight has been canceled. They at least acknowledge it. One does not even acknowledge a change to their product. They are the most dishonest organization in MMA, bar none. And it is really frustrating. And I mean, what can you do if you're a fan? You just have to like look on the internet to see if the fights are still happening. Like I just like noticed today that the Minowa and Zakirov fight was off. Don't know how long that's actually been canceled. I looked at both fighters' social media, nothing on there. They hadn't posted, and neither of them had posted in a while. I looked on Twitter to see if anyone else had mentioned it. No one had. There is nothing on the internet saying that fight was canceled aside from my tweet. Nothing. Not to say that there's probably many fans in Denver that are buying tickets for that fight, but it is still part of the product. You're going to see 10 fights instead of 13. And the event start time will be earlier if the fights are canceled, or later if the fights are canceled. So it is really, really dishonest. I would say it's overall bad business practice, but it's the cutthroat nature of one championship where they will do anything, including lie, to put themselves in a positive light, to pitch to their investors, to present the image that they're doing really well, that they're knocking it out of the park, that they're selling out arenas. There's nothing off limits for them in terms of lying and dishonesty and cheating. I don't follow BKFC, but did I see Tim Bosniak snap his ankle sideways, then pop it back into place like nothing happened? I didn't, and I'm not going to. No, I get really squeamish, so I will not be watching that. I would not watch that if that was an MMA either. Woof. Can you compare title reigns in different eras? I heard that if the level of competition is harder, it evens out to longer title reigns because of the longevity. DJ at 125 as an example against Pantoja. Interesting question. I don't think that you can really compare them because when their longevity, I think, would have more, you're having to deal with your own age longer, and you're also having to deal with the game changing over a period of time to a greater degree. So I still feel like DJ is the best to ever do it at flyweight, even with the Henry Cejudo loss, even with the Adriano Moraes loss. I still think that reign is the most impressive at flyweight and one of the most in MMA as a whole. There was a couple wins in there that were not really like, I would definitely not say are like super high level wins. They were the best. I mean, the UFC was building the division. It was in the early stages of development. So there are definitely a couple wins in there that were just kind of like keeping him busy kind of fights. But no, I mean, I'm pulling up his record now. And the fact that not only, I mean, he got a lot of finishes in those, finished John Moraga, finished Joseph Benavidez, finished Chris Carriasso, finished Kyoji Horiguchi, finished Henry Cejudo the first time, finished Wilson Hayes, and finished Ray Borg. So pretty solid finishing streak. So it really, like, it was the, I think the second John Dodson fight, right? Or the first one, maybe I think maybe the first John Dodson fight, he got knocked down and a little bit hurt in that fight. But the rest of those fights were really not that close. Tim Elliott had some good moments, but what I mean to say is that it showed the like elevation of his game over everybody else. So even the competition was not always like, it wasn't what it would be today. He still showed that he was like levels above the rest of the field and just able to do that. I mean, he won the belt in 2012 and he held the belt for over 6 years. And I think that was like 10 or 11 title defenses. So just the fact that out of all of those, there was no like wacky punch that got through his guard and knocked him down. Like, I still feel like you can't say like, well, this guy defended the belt against 3 really, really good guys, and this guy defended the belt 10 times against some subpar guys. There were some good ones in there. Like at the time, John Dodson was really good. Henry Cejudo, he does have a finish over him. Joseph Benavidez is solid as well. He's got two title defenses over him. So like there were definitely some really good fighters at the time. And I still feel like Pantoja and whoever else has a long ways to go before matching that, where I would even consider saying that they're the best to ever do it at flyweight. Just comparing things over different time frames just gets so weird, and I don't know. I mean, you can debate it, but it's so impossible to actually like accurately assess how they stack up. I just feel like for DJ, like he not only was beating everyone and was levels, but he just showed that he was levels above everybody in like every area. He was a complete fighter. He was submitting really good grapplers. He was finishing people on the feet. He was knocking people down. He was just a consummate fighter. And I don't know if he just slowed down by like, just like 2 ticks. And that's why eventually, Cejudo was able to beat him. And Cejudo's a great fighter as well. But, and then he's got the loss to Adriano Moraes, which he's avenged twice since then, once with a finish. So I don't feel like he's the GOAT. I don't feel like he's I would say he's probably top 5 GOAT, but I'd still put definitely John Jones and GSP ahead of him with that. But DJ he's amazing. And if he retires this weekend, like MMA will lose a really amazing truly world-class fighter with him. Don't know if you saw, but PFL put out an analysis of Lima versus Page KO. It was just putting circles on the most obvious things. Why do people usually think it's analysis? Well, I think it is still analysis, but it's just not very in-depth analysis. Analysis can be pretty skin deep, but it doesn't mean it's not analysis. I didn't see it. But analysis, the category of analysis doesn't even have to be correct. It can be bad analysis. It's still analysis, or it can be shallow analysis. And, it still is. They may have just made the decision to just you know, I don't know, cater to a very casual kind of fan. Perhaps that was the choice there. Road FC 70. Yeah, that was an amazing event. If you all have not watched Road FC 70, probably the fights are going to be on their YouTube, but that was a wild, crazy event. He said Park Siwan has a really tough test against Artur Soloviev. And sorry, I was just referring to Road FC 69 last weekend. I think this tells us a lot about him as a prospect. If he defeats this guy and wins his next match in the tournament, I see him as a future top 20 guy in the UFC. Honestly, he might be too good to put on RTU next year. Could be a Contender Series signing next year, or just signed outright. Yeah, and I feel like he's already at the Road to UFC level. He's shown that. He's been a top Korean prospect for a long time, and he just keeps winning. Had a tough test last weekend, but got by that. 7-0. Fights in the lightweight division, and just 22 years old. Let me show you this guy. He's ridiculous. Park Siwan is, you know, before we at Tapology took away these ARC wins, he would have been 10-0. And so, you know, these first several fights, lower level, but the last couple have been pretty good. Shutaro Debana, that was a solid win. He finishes the fight by ground and pound. So the guy's he's got really good power in his hands. And fighting Artur Soloviev, Russian guy, 30 years old. He finishes Park Jae-hyun with a knee last weekend. And look at that. He's already got a win over Nandine Ardine. Definitely, if he's able to beat this guy and then go to the finals and win that, I feel like you're in that, like, not quite the Kai Asakura level in terms of popularity, and not quite in that level of, like, you can leapfrog and go right to the front of the division whenever that fight is announced. But yeah, I would definitely think that Park, if he like I mean, you know, the way Contender Series works, usually a lot of times they'll put guys on there that probably shouldn't be there and should have just been signed. But just because of Park's age, we saw this last weekend, last Tuesday, Austin Bashi was on Contender Series, 22 years old, but a lot of people were saying that he was the top prospect in the US. And, you know, he got the contract, but I think he was probably on Contender Series just because he's so young. Because of that, I could see them going the same way. But, you know, like, I think that Road UFC next year is probably going to be, they're gonna get rid of the strawweight division, and they're gonna go back to just the men's division, have flyweight through lightweight. And if they can get their hands on Park Siwan, that would be really, really helpful for them. I think they didn't do it this year, the lightweight bracket, just because there may not have been enough fighters available, but maybe after a year off, they'll be able to get lightweight back in there next year, especially if Park is available. The timeline could really work out. He's going to fight October 27th in the semis, which, with a 3-month turnaround, that would put the finals either in January or February. So the timeline is literally perfect for Road to UFC. I'm guessing he signs contracts per season for Road FC. So it could work out pretty well. I feel like Road FC, there's a big power struggle in Korean MMA right now. You've got Road FC, you've got Black Combat, and then you've got AFC, which I don't really put at the same level as Road and Black Combat. They've got occasionally, really, like Kosa Kyun, who fought on Contender Series this last week, got the UFC contract. He was their welterweight champion. But so you've got AFC. You've also got Double G, which isn't really doing a whole lot, but every once in a while they'll have an event. But really, like, it feels like Road, not only do they have really good fighters, but the difference between I feel like Black Combat is going to, like, they've grown a lot, but I think they could hit their ceiling simply because they're not really putting on very many fights live, and it still is really targeted toward a Korean only audience. I'm wondering if there's going to be a Korean promotion grow to the scale of Ryzen, and probably not, and probably not for a long time. But I do think that potentially, like, if Black Combat changed a few, like, Black Combat can get really big. They're super popular in Korea, but just the way things are, I don't know if they're going to have that much of, like, a worldwide hardcore fan appeal like Ryzen is, just because of their format. But Road, if they keep, like, their show last weekend was really exciting. Really, all their shows are tremendous, and I wonder if they could keep growing, and if they keep getting these top fighters. It kind of reminds me of Ryzen a little bit, how they're mostly Korean, but they've got a couple foreign fighters that are really good. So that's something to watch. That's just an interesting question I have. Is Road, are they looking at Ryzen trying to be like, we could be the Ryzen of Korea? It does seem like, in a way, that they're doing that. I mean, they're airing live. They've got they're going in arenas, bigger arenas, not like Saitama Super Arena level, but yeah, that would be great if Ryzen had a kind of a, almost like a competitor with Road FC. I know they're a long ways apart. I'm not saying that that's in the imminent future, but there's blueprints of what a regional promotion could be all around the world, and of all of those, it's like Ryzen could be the most attainable for Road FC. So interesting to think about. According to Slack, he says analysis is not just using arrows saying what stuff happens, but why stuff happens, how it works with that specific fighter, the context of that move. Why is analysis so misunderstood these days? Well, I don't know that it's misunderstood. I just think that it takes the level of expertise and research that not a lot of people are willing to give. And because of that, I mean, in the same way, like, MMA media is done badly by a lot of people, but really, really well done and effectively by just a few. So anyone can attempt it. Anyone can attempt analysis, but only a few actually are, like, willing to both put in the research and accumulate the expertise. Like, if you're going to try to, if you want to be an analyst, you need to spend a lot of time learning and growing and not putting anything on the air. You need to just be, like, practicing before you go out on the air, because once you establish yourself as a bad analyst, then it's really hard to, like, polish up that. It's really hard to come back from that. So what a lot of people do is they attempt analysis, but they're not very good at it. And so it's going to be hard for them to ever, like, to ever improve. And I think some people just have a more analytical brain, where they're able to be like, why does this happen? But it's the same problem with broader MMA media. It's almost too accessible. What is toxicity in MMA, and how would you define it? Is it just disagreeing with other people, or just being obnoxious? I feel like toxicity often comes up when people take MMA too seriously. Because if you take it too seriously and you get so invested in it, and then you feel like you need to lash out against other people, then that's when it becomes toxic. all of us, myself included, even doing this as a profession, we all have to acknowledge that all of this is just a game. It's just a sport. All of this is just for our entertainment. And even covering it as a job, I have to understand that like this can't be my life. I can't get too invested in this. And it's all a game. Like this isn't gangs fighting each other's on the street. This isn't life and death. Like this is a sport. This is a game. This is entertainment. And you shouldn't hold on to things so tightly that anytime your worldview gets challenged, you feel like you have to like lash out and defend and overall just like online, like the online world is just such a poor substitute for real life relationships, because if we lived in a world where there was no online metaverse universe, then most of the toxicity of MMA disappears. Because in real life, when you have to see people face to face, you don't usually treat people like this. Some people do, but most of us don't. In real life, when you actually have to look someone in the eye, things happen to be way more civil. And we tend to treat people with respect because we're embodied people. Online relationships strips the body away from relationships, which I'm not saying that the online world shouldn't exist, but all of these things like reducing people to usernames and profile pictures and conversing with people at such a great distance, these are not real relationships in the fullest sense. They are real relationships, but they're not the fullest kind of relationship. Man, it was so good to go to Las Vegas and people that I just like message things back and forth of like, hey, do you know if this fight's happening? Do you know what the latest is on this? We're just exchanging questions. It was so good to just like sit across the table from some of these people, coffee in hand, for 2 hours and just be like, man, so like, how's it going living in this city? And how are things going with this? How's your job going? How did you get there? Tell me the story of that. And just like actually getting to know people almost like for the first time. And it just goes to show you like, I mean, there's ways that you can mitigate that a little bit online, but like when we take this sport so seriously and then we dehumanize people and just get lost in the online world, toxicity explodes. So I feel like we need to humanize people better, even people that do their job really badly, even people that post things that are like very clearly wrong on the internet. It's still important to humanize people. And it's also important not to take MMA too seriously, to take a step back and realize all of this is just a game. It's like, it's a world in and of itself, but like, it's all here for our entertainment. And I have to tell myself that a lot too, but it's all a game. And in 5 years, in 10 years, all these fighters that like are our favorites, they're going to be retired. They're going to be on losing streaks. They're going to be out of the picture totally. And there'll be a new crop of fighters and everything will just be turning over and over. There's like this futility to MMA, maybe even more than other pro sports where things change so quickly. And being involved, being a hardcore fan of MMA for almost 2 decades now, and these fighters that like there would be fighters that when they lost, I would literally, my eyes would start to water and I would tear up and I would just be so mad about this thing. And like, oh, this fighter like disrespected, my favorite fighter. I love Forrest Griffin back in the day. So it's like, oh, this fighter disrespected Forrest Griffin. I'm so mad about that. Like, what does that matter today? Not much. Like, I saw Forrest Griffin at the Apex a couple weeks ago, and I was like, man, like if I could just sit down with this guy and tell him all the great memories that he gave me. I'm not saying, and I think that's the takeaway is like your memories with MMA, those are totally real. Those are really like valuable things. The thrill and excitement you get from the sport, I definitely don't like disparage that or cheapen that, but like, but yeah, like these stars will come and go, and you just have to take a step back and realize like this is not worth me lashing out at other people. And like if I wake up and I have like 100 emotion dollars for the day, is it really worth me spending these emotion dollars on like lashing out at people and getting involved with like bickering and things like that? Or do I want to spend my emotional dollars on other things? I think being around the sport for a while has given me that perspective of like, I'll see these things happen in the sport. And there's a couple things that make me upset. Like when fans are taken advantage of and lied to, when athletes' careers are wrecked because of corruption in a promoter or a sanctioning body. Those things still really upset me because those are things that affect a fighter's whole life, but and like their overall well-being. But a lot of the other stuff, I'm just like, it's part of the sport. It is what it is. I can roll my eyes at it and just kind of move on. Brian, I've always thought that UFC created Road UFC because the Chinese fighters went 1-6 in Contender Series. Hopefully we can see more Asians in Contender Series now that fighters are showing they can compete for contracts in Contender Series. Yeah, I agree. And I think I've been asked about why certain fighters were in Contender Series and why some were in Road UFC. I think a lot of that, like if you look at those fighters, if you look at Kosa Kyun, Ding Meng, Yura Naito, and Taiga Iwasaki, those are our Asian fighters so far in Contender Series this year. They're all, I believe, welterweight and middleweight fighters. So why were they not put on non-tournament fights? I'm not really sure for Road to UFC. Maybe because they already had certain spots they really wanted to have for those non-tournament fighters. So they really wanted to have Yan Chi-Hui in Road UFC. They really wanted to have who else? Well, other fighters. You could be like, yeah, why were they in a non-tournament fight? I don't really know, but it was like for these other guys, they're just the weight classes were bigger, so I think they just thought, let's just put them in Contender Series. So I think probably just a weight class kind of thing. Typically, like, Asian fighters have not fared very well in Contender Series. I think if I'm thinking through this correctly, it was just, from the Korea, China, Japan triad, it's just Mahashata and Kosa Kyun are the only Asian fighters to win contracts through Contender Series, much less win. So Asians have not had a great run on Contender Series. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's just a selection thing of like who they're selecting. If I feel like if Ray Tsuruya, if he fought on Contender Series, I don't have any doubt that he could have won and got a contract too. So, or Rinya Nakamura. So it could just be the selection that they had. But Road UFC, I do think, I think that in the immediate, yes, this was primarily made for a lot of those Chinese fighters. I do actually co-sign on that, but I would say as a secondary goal, they wanted to throw in some of the more developing countries in terms of MMA talent, like they wanted to have Indians and Indonesians and Thais in there, sort of in a similar purpose as what Tough China was back in the day. And then even what Contender Series was for the Chinese fighters back in 2021. So like those Chinese fighters now are dominating Road UFC. Probably this year, there's going to be more Chinese fighters than any other country. I think there's only one tournament where there's not a Chinese fighter. That's isn't it flyweight? It's Kiru Singh Sahota versus Choi Dong-hoon. Flyweight, but the others, like I think featherweight is China versus China, and then the strawweight is Feng Xiaozan versus Shiming, who are not like Feng Xiaozan isn't a PI fighter, but Shiming isn't currently, but she has been. But yeah, it's like now you see China just running the board in Road UFC. But they've also had so much more UFC development than other countries. So I think like Road UFC had this secondary purpose where they could kind of start the ball rolling and put some investment in some of these other countries so that in 5 years, that 5 to 10 years, we can have really, really good Indonesians, really, really good Indians. And honestly, I mean, Angad Bisht, I mean, man, that guy looked really good. This last weekend at MFN, Chongren Koren getting a stoppage over Kantharaj Agasa, who was supposed to be in Road to UFC. Chongren Koren, probably, I would say, a top 3 Indian prospect right now, along with Angad Bisht and Sanjeet Budwar. I think all 3 of those fighters could, at the very least, make it to the semifinals of Road UFC next year. I think Angad Bisht could potentially even win it next year if he's back in. So India may not be as far behind as some people think, but Indonesia still has some work to do. But they're getting the ball going in the right direction. I'll say that. So I don't feel like it's unfair. I mean, I don't think the UFC cares at all if it's 100% Chinese fighters that go into Road UFC. That may be frustrating for fans of from different countries, but for the UFC, I don't think they really care at all if it's all PI fighters, Chinese fighters, whatever. Which they've opened up the PI to now more countries of fighters. So you could even get some PI fighters that are from India or like Sim Kai Xiong from Singapore. That'll be interesting to watch. Team Alpha Male is something of a conversation in the forums of Chinese MMA. There are people who say that Team Alpha Male does not make you an adaptable fighter and will become good at what you do. I don't think highly of their program, but why do so many Chinese fighters go there? Why not do the Zhang Wei Li thing and learn from everyone? Because I don't know if that's necessarily the right fit for everybody. I think other fighters prefer to have a consistent coach, a full, not only a consistent coach, but a consistent team as well. I think other fighters prefer just to have their whole environment consistent all the way through. And that obviously works for a lot of fighters. It's just a different perspective. And I do feel like, I mean, if Alpha Male was not a good gym, they would not have so many fighters in the UFC. And I think the reason why a lot of Chinese fighters go there, one, it's on the West Coast and it's closer, closer flight back home. You go to San Fran and then you can fly back to China. But also, I don't know what started it, but I think once you get one or two fighters there, then it just kind of becomes like a consistent place. Because like as a Chinese fighter, and this is from talking to the Chinese fighters and coaches, it's really, really hard to like, it's really important to go somewhere where you feel like you have a community and like others around you that can speak your language. So, and then it's like, and then once you're plugged in there for a while, you have a coaching set that starts to figure out like, hey, this is kind of how we can coach these Chinese fighters. Even you could even throw in like language as well. Like here's ways that we can, you think about like George Hickman going to Thailand, and he's now really, really good speaking in Thai, can coach fighters in Thai. So I don't know how much Chinese language the coaches at Alpha Male have learned, but they've at least kind of like figured out what their rhythm is with those fighters. I know like Ding Meng, he went and trained at Timo Yama in Southern California, and he had his manager along with him, and he was doing all the translation. But it's like, if you have a community of Chinese fighters, it's almost like a gym within a gym where you've all gotten good enough to where you can almost kind of like roll with each other, train with each other, make each other better, because with that, there's no language barrier. There's any of those fighters could be a coach as well. I mean, they're top of their game. There's you got two fighters that are ranked from China at Team Alpha Male and ranked really, really highly. So no, I would definitely push back that it's not a good gym. There's always criticisms with every gym, but they have something good. I mean, and Jan was able to go from like prelims to challenging for a UFC title shot. Song Yadong has gone from the same thing, except not quite the title shot level, but being ranked in the top 10 consistently for a while. And I would say the UFC's most competitive weight class. So they're obviously doing something there to develop fighters well. So if those fighters will eventually reach this, I mean, it's hard to be a UFC champion, right? So not everyone has also the connections and the resources to be able to do the traveling method as well. If I really tried looking at things from this perspective, everyone's just trying their best. When you have your inner circle and you have heart-to-heart conversations, you realize that's what the whole world is. Circle. You have heart-to-heart conversations, you realize that's what the whole world is. Not really sure if I understand your question, but I agree with that. I agree that like your inner circle, that's your whole world. And if again, like if I'm going to spend thinking about who to give the best, who gets my best, it's going to be my inner circle. Who am I going to spend my emotional, mental dollars on every day? It's going to be my inner circle. And some of those people, like I've formed, those relationships have started online, but it's like my inner circle. I don't think any of my inner circle watches MMA. I'm the only one, like, which is just so crazy to think. Like I have to always interpret things to my friends, like my inner circle. But I have a big inner circle. I have family, really, really close friends, roommate, people that I've known my whole life from childhood until now that know close to every single thing about me. And that really is my world. And those people can call me anytime. They can, get the best of my energies and attention. So for sure. You think we could see Maridul Saikia in Contender Series, or does he need more finishes? Also, will age be a factor with him being 29? I was impressed with his performance last weekend at MFN. There was him and Arshian Mimon were two 6-0 fighters that both had really good looking wins. So Saikia, I feel like on the one hand, I feel like there are Saikia, at least on Tapology, we have him as 27. He scored a 3rd round guillotine choke over Himanshu Kaushik, which that was a very tough fight, but I thought he looked good. Kaushik is a tough guy to beat. I feel like if you're casting for Road to UFC Contender Series next year, right now, he's not ready. He needs more fights in general. Hopefully, MFN will give him a flyweight contender fight, especially with Angad Bisht maybe potentially being totally out of the promotion. There's a vacuum there, and you could totally put him versus Maman. You could put that for a vacant title fight. You could also put one of those two guys against an outside competitor outside of India as well. But for Saikia, I think this would be a really good time to put him in the toughest fight that you could at MFN, or maybe a number 1 contender fight. So we need to see more from him. We don't want to rush him along too quickly. If he is 27, I'm not sure if he's 27 or 29, but if he's 27, I'd say let's get him like 2-3 more fights before we're talking about like UFC kind of stuff. But at the same time, like UFC has put fighters in Road to UFC that I think are less prepared than Saikia. Some of these Indonesian guys I would put behind him. So it's not totally out of the question if he's free from his MFN obligations that UFC could pick him up. They've put Rudra Pratap Singh. They put him in Road to UFC. They've put Sumit Kumar, who was, I think, really good, but one-dimensional at the time. They've put Gugun Guzman. They put Jeremiah Sirigar in Road to UFC. So I would favor Saikia over all those guys. So you never know. You never know what happens. It'll kind of depend when Road to UFC comes around and they're starting to recruit people in like late January and in February. It just depends on who's available, who's not booked in a fight, who's free from their contractual obligations. I know that's been a big thing with MFN in the past, why they haven't been able to get access to a lot of the top fighters. So it depends on that. But if he's free, I could see a long shot, but personally, I'd like to see him take a couple more. Let's see. Anyone I know who's worth any level of respect is doing their best. Sure. Sometimes they fall short, but they're still giving it their best shot. But everyone knows they're trying their best and not judging for them. Do I think that the internet will be a better place for everyone if they understood this idea? I do. However, some people's best is still not good enough, and some people's best still can cause some people, even trying their best, can make a mess. So I think that even if you understand that, even if you're like giving people the benefit of the doubt, it's still hard when like so many people are making messes or just putting out like blatantly false information. Someone could be like, hey, I tried my best to report this or, give this perspective, but the reality is that they just have not been competently trained to know how to evaluate information. And so it's like, I understand that you were doing your best giving what you knew how to do, but because you're making a mess. You probably shouldn't be on the internet. All the misinformation that you see around politics and just public discourse, a lot of people would say that they're doing their best, but they have not been trained in how to evaluate information and knowledge. A lot of people are not doing their best. I think for people to be doing their best, they need to be a little bit slower to post things. I think we all need to be slow to post things online. We need to think through things. We need to think through like what is unclear about what I'm about to say and where is their nuance. And maybe I need to like wait a little bit before I do that almost on a daily basis. I hold back from saying things that I really want to, because I'm like, yeah, I could see how someone might think that I'm trying to be an expert on this thing, and then I'm going to get criticized for this and this and this and this. And that criticism would be valid. So yeah, can't put this into words properly, but I feel that Adrian Lee is being mishandled, but I also don't want to judge him if he really has a passion for MMA. We saw what happened to Victoria Lee is one being insensitive. So he's fighting a 2-0 fighter tomorrow. So I don't have too many complaints about how they're handling Adrian Lee. They're not putting him on a poster. They're not, it seems like of all the headlines I see for tomorrow's event, Adrian Lee typically is not in those headlines. So I think I'm like okay with where things are at right now. He's again fighting just a 2-0 fighter, very unknown guy. So I'm good with that. They're not trying to like, put him against someone who's just outside the hypothetical rankings. I don't think there are rankings for his weight class, but put him against 2-0, 1-0, 2-2, 1-2, 3-4 kind of guys for a little while. And we'll see what happens. We'll see if it seems like his opponent tomorrow was vastly undermatched. And if so, then it's time to give him just a little step up, just a little bit, not a lot. Even when you're at a young age and you're undefeated and you don't have a lot of fights, you should never take big step ups between fights. You should only be taking little ones. And then and that's just the problem with fighting at your whole pro career with a bigger organization is think about Bilal Hassan, for example, this Indonesian flyweight that fights for CFFC. For CFFC, they really can put him against other guys in their organization that are 1-0, 2-0, 1-1, whatever. And then they can work their way up to where they're putting him against their best guys. But that's like a number one contender fight, a flyweight title shot, which is what he's getting end of this month. So that's a little bit better suited, where if it's like with one, it's like you never get the opportunity to like fight in a flyweight title fight in a regional promotion. That's such useful experience. And there's a bigger pool of low-level fighters for you to build your name against. So far, I don't have any criticisms with Adrian Lee. I also don't really follow One socials that much, so I don't really know how they've been promoting him, but I haven't seen too much for him ahead of this fight. So, so far so good. 169 is so much more stacked than 168. I wonder why that is. I understand Stamp got injured, but 169 would still be much better even if Stamp was on 168. And yeah, I do totally agree with that too. For 169, I wonder, and I'm going back to the why are we not loading these two cards up with all of our best MMA fighters and making it an MMA heavy card? Because it seems like there's so many fighters that are sitting on the shelf. is why I say that. But if they felt like they had to somehow like split their talent between these two shows, it does seem like they chose to stack Atlanta a little bit more. And maybe that's just because it's the first time they're going there. Anytime it's the first time you're going somewhere, you want to make the biggest possible impact. So I wonder if it's just because like they wanted to, like they gave the best of their resources for Atlanta. And yeah, you're right. Like the event, and I mentioned this too, the event in Denver took some hits. It used to be better. But 169 has, let's just take a look here. Anatoly Malikin versus Rug, which overall I would not say is like the best main event that one has put on. The Haggerty versus Superlek fight seems like it's more of like a, it seems like a little bit more of an even fight, at least in my mind. I could be wrong about that. 169 has Malikin versus Rug, has Rod Tang versus Jacob Smith. That got a lot of criticism. It got Tawan Chai versus Joe Nadawat, trilogy fight. Their last fight was really close. And then it has Christian Lee defending his belt against Ali Beg Rasulov, which I think he's making his one debut. Or no, no. He beat Okre Yoon. So, a fairly standard, you've got 4 title fights. Are the title fights, there's only, I think 2. Yeah, there's only 1 title fight at 168 where there's 4. So I don't know. I think, and then 169 also has Adriano Moraes versus Danny Kingod. A lot of the fight probably still hasn't been announced just yet, but it seems like some of the title fights there leave a little bit to be desired. I guess it's all up to your individual taste in a way, but yeah, I just don't know why I understand why they're putting Rod Tang on there, but honestly, I don't know why they're putting, you're putting a title fight, a Muay Thai title fight, right? Muay Thai, not kickboxing. Yeah. A Muay Thai title fight between 2 Thais in Atlanta. I don't know why you're not doing that in Thailand. And then just loading this card up with MMA title fights. Put Rod Tang on there. He's a more recognizable name. Sure. He had a good reception in Denver last year, but seems a little bit strange to put the Tawan Chai fight there in Atlanta. Pay for Ghost Substack, and he has a series called Execution Series where he shows you what he sees in scouting, how Whaley chooses to train for the habitat, then how it's executed in fight. What do you think of this idea that he said Whaley's team and him like to use their previous failures to prepare for opponents going to prepare for? For example, Rose head kick KO. Everyone who fights Whaley will try that on her, but she will have a different counter in each fight. Is that advantageous thinking? Honestly, I think that a lot of probably high-level fighters and champions train similarly. Those that use a lot of tape. So is it dumb for haters to label her as something? No, I honestly do think a lot of fighters probably do that too, and fix those mistakes, or at least they try to. So I think it might be a little more common than you think. But no, I mean that sounds like a great series for sure. I haven't watched it myself, but sounds great. Did you see the controversy that Miguel Clask on X caused? I did not. Where he wanted more people to pivot, but fans decided to be stupid and say that pivoting doesn't. Oh, yeah, I think we talked about this last week. Now, I'm not versed on this topic, but I've been pondering the idea that you can plan to counter a person's counter Depressingly, it seems like the idea could be developed enough to employ specific responses, then plan to punish the likely responses from an opponent is alien MMA. This highlights a huge part of why so much of MMA discourse is a puddle. Far too many fans are quite literally incapable of thinking beyond first stage responses. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last week, but again, it goes back to the analysis thing. Everyone can do it. Everyone can try. Only if you can be good. Only if you're willing to put in the work, for sure. Yeah, Rio, you did send me the Wang Tong breakdown. I had meant to get back to your emails, and I'm sorry about that. But I think of the idea of Tong attacking positional changes like Ghost showed. Is that instinct a fighter develops? Because I notice she does that in other fights too. Yeah, and I mean, that's something that you see from high level strikers as well. A lot of fighters that come in from kickboxing backgrounds do that. So yeah, I haven't watched that breakdown, but I promise I will watch that before next week and respond to your other email as well. So I appreciate that. Another sound and pound topic. Some people bought $6,000 worth of seats, but the UFC lowered the prices to $1,000. Would you be annoyed if you bought the $6,000 tickets? Well, first of all, if I had $6,000 to blow on anything, then probably I'm doing pretty well for myself. So, but that is the reality. So you're talking about UFC 306, UFC Noche, Riyadh season, all that stuff at the Sphere. They're trying to get as many people in the Sphere as they can. They started with the ticket sales being super, super high, maybe a little bit bloated, but there's still, I would say there's not like an abundant amount of seats available, but there's still a good amount of seats available. At this point, they're just trying to fill it up. And this is like, I mean, this is typical practice for MMA, sports, events in general. So if you're buying through tickets, like through Ticketmaster, if you're buying tickets to anything, you kind of just have to know that this could happen. Now, the scale that would happen, $6,000 tickets going down to $1,000. I mean, yeah, I think I'm not sure if there's like a kind of insurance that you can buy where you can like potentially refund your tickets, but if I could sell my tickets and then rebuy them again, I would like to, but I'm guessing they probably don't have that kind of insurance to protect against that. But yeah, I would be pretty pissed. And I think if you know much about like events, like I think probably some of those people bought tickets as soon as they went on sale because they were afraid that they might sell out. So they're just trying to get a spot. But most of the time it's like it's in your best interest to like wait a little bit and see if things come down. If I were buying tickets to the Sphere, that's what I would have done. But yeah, that's insane. Those tickets, I just like, I'm curious how much tickets usually run for other shows at the Sphere, and if that's at all comparable. No, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I'm not going to bore you guys with that, but I'll look at that after the fact. So it's just this Sphere show. I am honestly really intrigued by it too. I think mostly intrigued by how is the UFC going to present this like on. I'm mostly interested in the TV product. How are they going to have this live broadcast and be enjoyable for fans at home? I saw a quote today. I think it was from an Aaron Bronstetter article where he interviewed some of the people that designed the Sphere show, where they're like, we want people watching at home to feel like they're actually at the Sphere too. I'm like, well, that's impossible because a lot of us are going to be watching on our laptops or on our 30-inch TVs. So that's impossible. Most of us don't have a great sound system, but anytime, it's like when you're looking at a screen and what's on the screen, there's a screen behind it. I actually literally had to work through this issue at one of my other jobs today. That was actually why I showed up just on time, was because I was fixing an issue just like this, where there's a screen behind us. There's a camera filming something, but then there's a screen that's in the shot. So making sure that that doesn't like mess with things and make things a headache. That's what I'm so curious about with this Sphere show. But otherwise, I'm excited. I mean, it's so rare that we get a UFC show that just so far breaks out of the mold of a typical UFC product. Everything is so consistent with the UFC, even to a fault, to where it'd be nice to have a little bit more differentiation and individuality and showing the arena a little bit more and letting things be customized more and more. But to their credit, things are very consistent. They work usually very well. ESPN Plus withstanding, but yeah. So I am fascinated by this show as well. It's interesting that they're touting so much the price tag, that they're like, part of the branding for the show has been how much Dana has talked about how much it's going to cost them. And that's obviously why the tickets are so expensive, is they're trying to make up a lot of that money. And a lot of times I think the UFC can overestimate how much fans are willing to pay, but, or like the demand for something. And so they're touting how much it's going to cost, but I'm also like, I'm curious about also the Riyadh season branding, how far that goes. If the UFC is 20 million in the red on this event after the Riyadh season funding, yeah, that's just insane. I mean, they had to hire film directors that are outside the sport of outside of sports to help design some of this stuff. So really insane. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm hoping to be able to watch the whole show because I feel like it'll just be almost in its own genre. It's not often that we get shows where just visually it's so different. I mean, how many UFC shows can you think of that were visually really, really different? Really, it's just UFC 200 with the yellow canvas. It's a little bit I'm thinking of the early Abu Dhabi shows that were outdoors. Aside from that, things have been pretty much the same. We already have established the UFC wants dumb fans and least educated fans imaginable. Hey, they want fans that pay. That's everybody. That's every sports brand. They just want people to pay. Why do you think there's a mindset where these fans pretend like they know everything? Doesn't that ultimately hurt the sport? I'm a fan that constantly searches for knowledge and tries to have it challenged by those smarter than me. It's not hard to take on that mindset, but most fans want to seem smarter than they are. Is it really that hard to research and challenge yourself so you can get respected? It honestly is. It is hard to research. Again, it's a patient work. It takes time. And when when I was just starting out as an MMA fan, back as a high schooler when I was 17 years old, I was so excited to be a part of the world of MMA. I couldn't get enough of it. I stayed up late watching UFC DVDs. I would go to the video store and blow all of my money on Pride DVDs, UFC DVDs. I would take home the posters from Buffalo Wild Wings after the event. And when I finally got to go to a UFC event, it was the greatest night of my life, even though it was just a measly fight night card in Oklahoma City. So the zeal was just so big. And so I can kind of understand how fans just are so excited to take part in the MMA community. And especially if there's a fighter that they really, really like, they're excited to be a part of the discourse around that fighter. I don't think everyone has the perspective of being around for a long time to know that, like, kind of that maturity of like, oh yeah, there's different kinds of fans here, and thinking through things and knowing that it takes time to really be educated in the sport. But I mean, I was totally the guy that, like, after watching a couple episodes of The Ultimate Fighter and looking up like 2 YouTube videos on how to do a rear naked choke and a guillotine choke, the next event I was watching, I was telling my friend, I was breaking it down, telling him how to do the rear naked choke or the guillotine. Like, it doesn't take much to feel like you're an expert. So it's just a new fan kind of thing. And I think it's similar. If you try to get into any sport, or if you try to be a fan of any sport, if you just go out and watch a movie and someone asks you, what did you think about it? Even if you're not a super big film nerd, you're going to give your thoughts about it. Well, I thought this, I like this or that. And it may not be the most educated opinion, but it's still your opinion. So I think I can understand why things are where they're at. And I can understand why people want to take part in conversation. They're going off pure zeal. A lot of questions. Love it. Saw this in an earlier chat room, but there was a guy complaining that his work as a journalist wasn't being shared. Oh, well, whose fault is that, my friend? And said that he approached bigger accounts to share his work and they just ignored it. Yeah, because if you're a professional, that's like the first red flag, is that you don't ask people to share your stuff. First rule. He claimed that there's too much elitism in MMA media. Do I agree? Absolutely not. No, I'm in like 100% opposition in that. You should never ask anyone to share your work. And if you make good content and you know a little bit about SEO and you know about branding, the strategy behind it too, like you're gonna get shared. But yeah, never ask people to share your work. That's the first sign. I will share occasionally people's work. Like, I think for the first time ever, I did a collab post on Instagram over the last couple of weeks, a couple actually, with another creator. And they invited me to be people invite me to be a collaborator on their work all the time. Almost all the time. And I always don't do it either, because what they're inviting me to collab on does not fit my niche, or it doesn't fit my branding, my style. It wouldn't look good on my page. I don't feel like the quality is big enough. There's a lot of reasons. And I never tell that to them. I never say like, hey, this isn't good enough, but if they asked for feedback, I would give it to them. But usually I just ignore those requests. But I got invited by an account that I have messaged with before, and I think that they have a pretty high value in their work, and it actually looks pretty good on my page, I think, and goes right into my niche, and is almost like, oh yeah, I would have loved to have created the pretty much exact same kind of stuff, but you're kind of doing it for me in a way. So I did it. And but otherwise, if I see something that I really like, I'll share it. And yeah, other opportunities in life, it's okay. Like, it's good to ask, like, but in media, I would say don't ever do that. That's just like a code. And if you're saying there's elitism in MMA media, it's like, would you say the same thing about like cooks and chefs and restaurants and like, well, like just make the comparison. You walk into a restaurant, you walk into a pizza restaurant, and you made really, really, really good fried chicken. Say it's actually pretty good fried chicken. You walk in there, it's not the best fried chicken, but it's pretty good. You walk in there and you're like, hey, do you guys want to sell my fried chicken here? And they're like, no. And then you're like, well, there's just too much elitism in the food industry. It's like, I don't know if that's elitism or if that's just the way a career works, the way a profession works, is not everyone can do it. So just apply that argument across different fields. Also said that MMA community is filled with people who are sarcastic and demean people with smaller accounts. I do agree with that. And we've talked about that quite a bit. You went to Road to UFC and seemed like many media members respected you. Yes, the media members respected me. And I will say that the media members that I interacted with, I already had a relationship with them. And we've like communicated before. Alex Bahunin and I, we've talked before, we message offline, like, and we've got a good relationship. And I've got that with a lot of media members. People generally have seen my work and there's no red flags that stand out with it, basically. But I will say that like there was someone on UFC PR that had a lot of reservation. Like I could tell that if they had it totally their way, they would not have brought me in. And I know for a fact that I was rejected in the past for media credentials because I was too small of an account, too small of a page. And I totally understand that. So like, even the fact that I feel like I do good work most of the time, that's not always good enough. I think just having the longevity, the reputation, and then building the platform, like that's worth something too. So I do think that people can disrespect small accounts too much. Like y'all will bring things up to me that I'm just like, I didn't see that. Totally didn't. Totally slipped by me because I just am not a part of that world. But yeah, let's talk reputation. If you released fake fight news, is it possible to fix that bad reputation? Is it possible to build up bridges that you have burned? I think it is, but you just have to stop doing that thing. You have to stop doing all the dumb things, and you have to only do things that will get you back in people's good reputation. You got to play it safe for a while, a long, long time. But I do think you can rebuild your reputation. Some fans and media members will always remember it, but there's also fans that come, like the fan turnaround and even media turnaround will continue. And eventually the group that you have the bad reputation with, I think a lot of them will wash out and turn over. So I think you can recover your bad reputation, but just play it safe, do good work. It's maybe best to be a little bit more risk averse meaning like reporting news, breaking news for the first time. You may want to back off from that for a little bit. Yeah, I mean, we all know there's way too many people trying to report and break news, and too many people trying to do like higher level things right away. And reporting and breaking news doesn't seem like it's a higher level thing because it seems like you should be able to just ask a question and get an answer. If someone tells you something that seems like they're reliable, it should seem easy, right? But it's not as easy as people think. So I think it is possible, though. What do I think about the saying from Edgar Allan Poe about writing? Love Poe. Your job as a writer is to inform or entertain. Anything else, then you aren't doing your job. agree or not. I do. There's a lot of different purposes for writing, but overall, I would say yes. I would definitely agree with that. If you're not informing, you're not entertaining, then, I mean, here I am just repeating exactly what the quote is with my own emphasis. No, I totally agree with that. That's a great quote. Poe is great. I have a giant book of like all of Poe's works that I'm like slowly working through. Not going to name anyone specific, but James Lynch talked about Ariel doing his own content. Why do you think brain dead negative talking heads get more engagement than stuff like your work? I think it's worth talking about that. I actually really appreciate people talking about other things that are going on in media, like Lynch, because Lynch is able to do the higher level stuff really, really well. So I actually really appreciate that. He's not yelling at the camera. He's not, when he's really, really mad at people, usually if he's like really mad at something, I tend to agree about it. Like, yeah, that checks out. But usually it's like he just wants to have a conversation. I actually really appreciate that someone in media is talking about that. So, because then it gives you a little bit of like an insider's perspective on these things rather than just like the fan perspective. So I appreciate that. And the thing is like, again, like we're trying to entertain. We're talking about things like just look at this chat week to week. How many of the questions do I get that are about other media members, that are about MMA media as a whole? Like every week, it almost feels like sometimes it feels like it's like half the questions. So people want to talk about it, and I mean, you all are asking me these questions. I'm in the media, like, so asking James Lynch about that, or even like James proactively making that kind of video, I think those are questions that fans are asking. So I totally understand why he would make videos kind of about, this is what this other media member is doing. Now, I haven't watched that video. I haven't heard his take on that, if I agree with it or not. But I appreciate, like, James Lynch is one of the people that I've learned the most from, because he's actually one of the few places that you can, as an aspiring media member, it's almost like you can just find tutorials on MMA media kind of things. I watched a lot of his videos about gear ahead of time before going to Las Vegas, and used some of his recommendations. And overall, just like, he is someone that I feel like makes MMA media better, because he's actually regurgitating his knowledge and like bringing everyone else up, for sure. To add to my team alpha male that it's not good, Yan Shannon will never fight for a belt again. Never say never. And Song Yadong is at the Jeremy Stevens stage where people have to fight him smart, but as a gatekeeper. I would be careful saying that too. He's also really young. He's still getting better. And I feel like he's farther along than Jeremy Stevens ever got. Given most of when Jeremy Stevens was fighting, the UFC didn't have rankings. So it may not be totally fair, but I do feel like Song is at a further place in his development. Like he's been at places like when he fought Peter Yan, it was almost like if he beats him, he could be fighting for a belt. So I still think that Song will definitely fight for a belt one day. I'm on the fence about Yan. I don't know if she will or not. She's like 35. But the whole weight class is a little bit older, right? So, and there's not a ton of new blood coming up. So you never know. Never say never. I mean, if you fight for a belt, you lose a decision, but you had a lot of redeeming moments from that fight. say you knock out your next two opponents, you're right back there. So like, you never know what's going to happen. If I had to guess right now, I would say no, but it's up to her to prove us wrong, right? To clarify my question earlier, Whaley's haters often label her as not smart and just rely on strength rather than smarts. I was asking if her approach to film study was stupid, like her haters say. No, we've talked about this many times, and it's a great way to do film study, and I've never seen that criticism before of her. So, you know, I would say this might be a moment to, my suggestion would be this could be a moment to be like, this is all just a game. Y'all don't know what you're talking about, and I'm going to move on with things. So, but you do you, and enjoy MMA the way that you want to. There you go. So yeah, there you have it. That's the podcast for today, guys. Thanks for your questions. Appreciate your participation. I will be pretty much watching fights all day long this Saturday, giving coverage over UFC and over JCK. Keep it locked to the webpage, MMAecosystem.com. You can find the full calendar for Asian MMA, as well as UFC, Bellator, PFL, all that stuff on there, updated multiple times a day. Links to the different streams, highlighted prospects, all that good stuff. All that good stuff. I'll also have recaps. It's a great center for all things Asian MMA. Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. We'll see you guys later, and enjoy the fights this weekend.